Hi, everybody, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar on the legal requirement for B Corps in Canada. My name is Joyce Su. I'm the Director of Business Development here at B Lab, and I'd love for us to just get a chance to hear in the chat, just to have people introduce themselves and say what company they're from. So go ahead and do that while I talk a little bit about what we're expecting to do today. And I'm joined by some great people who will share a little bit about what you could expect. We've got also some understanding of the B Corp experience on what the actual legal requirement looks like in terms of practice, and also be sharing kind of the why and the history around that. So let's just take a look at our agenda. And so the main things that we know that you're all asking about is, what are the practical steps that we need to do, or maybe some of you are consultants and are thinking about how you need to communicate this to your client as well. And so I'm going to share a little bit about the Canadian legal requirement, why B Lab is requiring it. You'll hear a process of becoming a benefit company, which is specific to BC. We've got a few different pathways to do that in Canada. And then we have got a B Corp perspective. So we've got two B Corps going to share a little bit about what it means to them, how they did it, what that looks like. Throughout this webinar, we're going to open up the Q&A. So we have some people in behind the scenes that will be answering, and then we'll also leave some time at the end if there's some additional questions that we need to discuss live. One thing that's important to note, this webinar is recorded. And you'll get access to the recording, you'll get access to our slides and any additional resources that may be useful to you. Let's keep moving. So most of you know who we are, but I just kind of want to reground us. We're from B Lab, we're a nonprofit, and what we're aiming to do is build a new economic system. And we're doing that by really cultivating, mobilizing, and amplifying the collective impact of a community of credible, stakeholder-driven business leaders. And what we want to do is drive economic systems change for the benefit of all. And this is where the legal requirement is really important. Let's just move on to the next slide. We are part of a global community. And so that's what's also interesting, is that the legal requirement is different in different jurisdictions. We've got over 4,000 certified B Corps, 153 different industries, 77 countries, with this one unifying goal of building an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic system for all people and the planet. Another interesting thing to note is that the demand for certification has really skyrocketed in the past year or so. Some of you may be experiencing some of the delays and backlogs, and we've had to reconfigure some of the requirements on how we require companies to be ready for certification in order to make sure we're having the most streamlined experience. So what does one have to do to become a B Corp? We've envisioned the certification in kind of three pillars. The first part, which should not be any strange piece to you, is the B impact assessment, which is our performance requirement. And so hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at it. If not, you can go on to bimpactassessment.net. And you need a verified score of over 80 in order to certify. And this is really about taking into account all stakeholders in our performance. And so it's measuring that piece. The second piece, which is what we're going to really dive into today, is the accountability, which is the legal framework. And it's about really embedding the purpose of considering all stakeholders in your decision-making into the DNA of your company. The last piece is around transparency. When a company certifies, their score is made available on our B Corp directory. And so that score is in a summarized form, but really talks to how you're considering all stakeholders in your decision making. The way that I like to talk about this is, the first step is kind of like looking back, or is your present. The B impact assessment tells you what you've done in the past and what you've committed to. What you've, policies that you have put in place. And so that gives you a snapshot in time. The legal framework, what we're going to talk about today, is really about looking forward. It's about committing to continually considering other stakeholders in your decision making and building that into your legal DNA. And the third part is about communicating. The transparency piece is about communicating your commitment and what you're doing to all your stakeholders. And so these three pieces really are required and interconnected into the essence of what B Corp certification is about. But today we're going to focus on the legal framework. So let's just talk about what that roadmap is. Most of you are here are really interested in certifying. And so, what we've created is just steps to what a successful certification process looks like. The first piece is really about getting to 80. You want to explore that assessment, get into there, see the areas that you need to improve on, and think of a plan of how you're going to embed those. The second piece, really important, is to understand the legal requirement and pathway. Not all companies are prepared for that when they go through certification, and that really impacts their ability to be successful through certification. Obviously, getting team leadership and buy-in is really important. One thing as you move into that actual practicality step is you have to submit your BAA, your impact assessment, in order to go for review or verification. And at the same time, while you're waiting, because as I had mentioned before, we've got a long backlog, the best thing to do is to start working on your legal requirement. I had mentioned before, due to the backlog, we've made some changes in how we've kind of reconfigured the steps to certification. Some of you may have been in the B Corp movement for a long time. You may have known that, for example, we've allowed legal to be done later because it was newer to companies and they needed more time to understand it. And now that we've been in the market for about 10 years, the legal requirement is not as new anymore, and it's actually quite feasible. And so we're asking companies to do this ahead of time before they actually finalize certification. This not only ensures that companies are ready, but it allows us to ensure that the companies that are in our pipeline for certification are the ones that are most committed to doing so. Let's move on to the next slide. And so this is just talking about, adopting that stakeholder governance piece. This is a key pillar in certification. And I had mentioned about doing the legal first. This is really for companies that have less than 50 employees. We recognize where companies have more than 50 employees, there's a little bit more conversation with your shareholders that need to happen. And so we do allow for more time. But we do say that if you're under 50, that is a requirement to do that before you can actually certify. And so let's keep moving forward. What does that look like? And so I know there's a lot of information here. I just want to be sure that people know that we've got some links to resources that provide a bit more detail. And so you don't have to worry about taking too many notes now. Really, it's about, number one, understanding what it is, reviewing that language. And in the next slide, we'll show you what that language is. And then figuring out who you need to talk to get buy-in. We've got some great memos, some memos that are really specific to founders, and executive leadership teams. We also have memos that are specific to lawyers. And so that's also helpful for your legal team if they're interested in wanting to understand what this, what the implications are. We've been able to do that. And so that should be really helpful. It does require a special resolution. And, we give you specific language on what that legal, paragraph by paragraph, 5 paragraphs, is required for you to amend those articles. And we have it available in English and in French. Once that special resolution has been passed, you're going to need to file that at your provincial jurisdiction or federal entity. And so if you go online, I think a lot of these things can now be done online. In terms of cost, it can range between 150 to 200, depending on your province. And then the last piece is to upload that into your impact assessment app to show that you've got proof that you've actually made that change. Moving on to the next slide, I mentioned we have those 5 paragraphs. These are outlined here, exactly what the language is. Some people ask, I already have an operating agreement that states the purpose of my company. It is certainly beyond just maximizing shareholder value, and that's great. But for the B Corp requirement, we do require that there is specific language about talking about a commitment to consider all stakeholders and not just one area where a lot of companies may be focused on one group. And that is really the core of the theory of change, of how we expect or how we are hoping to drive economic systems change is through a multi-stakeholder approach. And that's the language that's going to be required here. If we go to the next slide, there's another one that's an alternative amendment for the just CBCA companies. And again, the language is here that we can also provide with you after this webinar. And so that's it for me. It's kind of the starting piece. One thing I will say before we go forward with the benefit company piece, as we're really specific to BC, is that people often ask, why is this necessary in Canada compared to the States? Our legal environment is very different, which is true. And what we know from the Canadian legal environment is that companies are uh, allowed, for example, directors are allowed to consider other stakeholders in their decision making, and so they are permitted to do so when we think about the definition of the best interests of a corporation. But what B Corp does is goes one step further, which is committing directors to considering other stakeholders. And it's not just allowing for them to do it, but to say and to signal to your stakeholders that this is what we're about and we are committed to doing so. So now I'm going to give the floor to Elaine, who is an associate lawyer at Synergy Business Lawyers, LLP, and she's going to talk a little bit about meeting the legal requirement for a benefit company.
Morning, everyone. You can all see me. Thank you for the introduction, Joyce. My name is Elaine Choi. I am from Synergy Business Lawyers. I am an associate lawyer there. We're a corporate commercial law firm, and I'm excited to talk to you today about the legal requirements of becoming a benefit company here in British Columbia. So effective as of June 30th, 2020, companies in BC can now form what is called a benefit company. So BC is actually the first and currently the only province in Canada to have benefit companies explicitly recognized as a separate legal entity through their legislation. So what is a benefit company? A benefit company is a for-profit taxable company that, one, commits to conducting its business in a responsible and sustainable way, and secondly, promotes one or more public benefits. And so for clarification, I know Joyce just went through the legal requirement for the certification process. Becoming a benefit company in BC is a distinct process from the B Corp certification process. So if we go on to the next slide. So two different legal features about the benefit company than traditional companies that are incorporated under the Business Corporations Act. The first is that a benefit statement must be included in the notice of articles for the company. So for those of you that already have a company incorporated in BC, you'll be familiar with the notice of articles. It's a publicly searchable document. It gives basic information about the company, such as the incorporation date, the registered records office, as well as it lists who the directors are. So for benefit companies in BC, it's also going to include the statements. So I've included here an example that you can see on the PowerPoint. And it says in the statement, it's going to be the same for all benefit companies. This company is a benefit company, and as such, is committed to conducting its business in a responsible and sustainable manner and promoting one or more public benefits. And if we just go over to the next slide. And so you may be wondering, what does it mean to conduct your business in a responsible and sustainable manner? This is actually defined in the Business Corporations Act, and it means that the company takes into account the well-being of persons affected by the operations of the benefit company, and secondly, endeavors to use a fair and proportionate share of available environmental, social, and economic resources and capacities in carrying out its business. If we go over to the next slide. The second legal difference for benefit companies over your traditional company is that the articles will include a benefit provision. And so the company's articles are different than the notice of articles. This is sort of like the company charter or constitutional document. It lays out the specific rules of the company's organization. It'll generally list out the share structure for the company, as well as shareholder and director procedures in company matters. And so this document is also open for inspection by the public at the Registered Records Office. And so the articles must include a benefit provision. And in the statute, this means that you need to specify the public benefits the company is going to promote. And the public benefit is a positive effect for the benefit of either a class of persons other than shareholders of the company, a class of communities or organizations, or lastly, for the environment. Over to the next slide. I won't go over the advantages in too much detail because I think some of the other panelists are going to be doing a good job of that. But just to shortly summarize, obviously incorporating or changing your existing company into a benefit company in BC will help you to differentiate from your competitors. It's going to be a signal to consumers, shareholders, potential partners, as well as investors of what the company stands for, its values, and those are going to be enshrined right into the company's corporate documents. Over to the next slide. So in terms of the process, if you've ever incorporated a company here in BC, it's going to be a very similar process, except that, of course, the notice of articles and articles are going to contain the benefit statement and the benefit provision, which we just talked about. As well, the forms are going to be a little bit different. It's going to be filing a Form 01 Benefit Company Incorporation application. And this can be done either in person at the registry, mailed in, emailed, or it can also be done via BC Online if you already have an account. There's a $350 filing fee for doing that. And for clarification, the company name, once you become a benefit company in BC, the name does not need to actually include benefit corporation or benefit company. Going over to the next slide. For those of you that already have an existing company here in BC and you want to change or alter the company to become a benefit company, you're going to have to alter the notice of articles and articles to include that benefit statement and benefit provision. And so what this will require, it's very similar to what Joyce discussed in her slides. It's going to require what's called a special resolution of the shareholders of the company. Typically, that's going to be about 2/3 to 3/4 approval of the shareholders. The threshold is generally set out in the company's articles, existing articles. I also like to caution my clients, you may have an existing shareholders agreement that could alter that threshold. Generally, there may be included in a shareholders agreement a majority or major decisions provision, and typically a change to the notice of articles and articles may be considered a major decision that could require unanimous consent of the shareholders of the company. So I always like to remind clients to take a look at that. Once the shareholders approve, you file a Form 52, and this unfortunately right now cannot be done through BC Online, but it can be done in person at the BC Registry, or you can email it in with payment or send it in via mail or courier. It's a $100 filing fee when you're amending, and there's no name change required. So going over to the next slide. Again, I think Joyce already touched on this, but for those that are looking to sit on the board of directors for a benefit company, there are some key differences in the duties of directors. So the Act actually makes it mandatory for directors and officers to conduct the business in a responsible and sustainable manner and to promote the public benefits that are specified in the company's articles. And so for non-benefit companies, there's case law in Canada that makes it permissive for directors to consider other stakeholders, but the Act for benefit companies now makes this mandatory. And directors and officers are going to have to learn to balance this with their existing fiduciary obligation to act honestly and in good faith with a view to the best interests of the company. What this balancing duty is going to look like in practice, we sort of have yet to see, as there's no sort of case law on this, but I'm sure that that will develop over time. And then going over to the next slide. Something that's different for benefit companies over the traditional company is also the reporting requirements. So this is a great thing because it enforces some accountability for benefit companies. So the companies actually have to prepare and publish an annual benefit report. The report assesses the company's performance in carrying out its public benefits. And it's actually the company's directors that self-assess the company. And it's in accordance with a third-party standard developed by a third-party standard-setting body. And so an example of that would be, of course, B Lab. The directors place the report before the shareholders at the company's annual general meeting. So very similar to the financial statement preparation and review that you have to do on an annual basis for companies in BC. Once that's done, The report will be deposited at the records office and it's available for public access. And if the company has a publicly available website, the company is also required to post the report on the website. Last slide. I won't go over the specifics of what's included in the benefit report, but you can refer back to the slides to check for that. The only comment that I'll make that's not included in the slide is that if a company fails to publish or post a benefit report, or publishes or posts one that's not in accordance with the requirements in the Act, this is considered an offense under the Business Corporations Act, and it could subject the company to a fine of up to $5,000. And so that concludes my presentation for today. But if you have any questions, or if you're looking to incorporate a benefit company in BC or transition your existing company to a benefit company in BC, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to assist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elaine, for your time and for sharing that and building that out in such a easy to understand way. The next that we've got is, I believe, Stephen, and I just want to make sure, yes, Stephen Hobey from Hosokawa Marketing. As we had said before, what Elaine just talked about really specific to BC, and so we know that there are other provinces being represented here, and so Stephen's going to talk. Stephen's a B Corp. Was going to speak a little bit about what that looks like, the legal amendment for him based in Ontario. Stephen, take it away. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Joyce. Hopefully I did unmute. Yes, I did. My company is Hobey Hosokawa Marketing. We've been running for about 12 years now, located in Toronto. And actually for the past 3 years, we've been a registered B Corp. Just to give you a little bit of background, we're actually literally a two-man operation with myself as CEO and marketing strategist, and my partner in both business and life, Mitsuo Hosokawa, who's my creative director. And for us, it's really kind of a perfect synergy, I guess, if you will, because I tend to work a lot with clients on marketing strategy in terms of messaging and branding and positioning and all that stuff. And then it gives Mitsuo, when I hand him for design or video, kind of a clear path forward. Typically, we've been doing a lot of social media work, videos, print, website development, social media campaigns, and that sort of thing. I think it's important for me to mention that our overarching purpose as a company is to actually work with organizations and firms who ascribe to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So for us, those SDGs are kind of like our guiding light, as it were. And although, as a company, we've evolved over 12 years and the mission has changed, that sort of SDG mandate has remained the same. And just very briefly, in terms of the areas that we've operated in, we tend to do a lot in human rights work, mental health, sustainability, of course, as well as education. I think we've had a really great experience as a B Corp and been very involved in different projects and events and stuff like that. And I think that we truly believe in the B Corp philosophy of balancing people, profit, planet. And I'm very much a stickler for seeking out clients who also share this belief system. So in terms of the amendment to the corporate articles, we actually this past summer needed to become recertified. And this legal requirement, which had not yet been embedded into our corporate articles, kind of was the final step to this. So we needed to integrate that into our corporate language. I think that what I should stress is that really, in essence, at least for us, the process was extremely simple and straightforward. At the time, I was changing over to a different lawyer, but luckily we are also members of the Centre for Social Innovation in Toronto, CSI, and I put the word out and was able to find a really great lawyer who actually specifically deals with ecopreneurs and social enterprises working literally to build a sustainable new green economy. So he helped me through the process. And I guess I just whittled it down to 3 steps that I could think of, which was, again, to, as Joyce mentioned, identify the actual language that's provided by B Lab, then pass the necessary resolution to authorize the change, and then file that amendment at the government offices. So the process itself was simple and not expensive. I believe my lawyer charged me $125 to do that. And certainly, if you want his contact information, I'd be happy to give that. In terms of anything I would have done differently, I think I definitely would have done the legal requirement earlier. I guess it seemed to loom above me as something a lot more complicated than it actually was. And I think just getting it out of the way so that you can get recertified or certified, I think is the best thing to do. One thing I did want to mention is that I think it's important to have that language in your corporate articles, because I think it literally embeds the B Corp philosophy within the actual DNA of your business. And for us, even though we're only 2 people, it reminds us of our ethical approach to business. And actually, right in that language, it literally states that the company should, quote, promote the creation of a positive impact on society and the environment. So actually, that rings true for me. And also it reminds me when I'm dealing with suppliers, in our case, recording studios and other designers, accountants, lawyers, that also they are abiding by those ethical standards. I think if you happen to be an early stage entrepreneur, in terms of any further advice, again, I think get the legal requirement out of the way, find yourself a reasonably priced and ethical lawyer who can handle the amendment, and then it can be done in a matter of days, filed, signed, and sealed. I know in Toronto, the government office is right on University Avenue, and I think it took us half an hour to file that. So I hope that was helpful and concise, and I'll pop my name and email into the chat just in case you want to reach out.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And thank you for that. It's good to know that there are also contacts that you have, and so if people are interested in that, Stephen is as welcome to do so.
Absolutely.
The next that we have is Jenna Kuchitsky from Yulu, and she's a senior ops manager there. And Yulu is a PR firm based in BC, and so she'll speak about the benefit company experience. Thank you, Jenna.
Great, thank you. And there are my lovely slides. Thank you. So thank you for having me. Excited to share our experience becoming a benefit company. So Yulu is a purpose-driven communications agency. We were actually the first PR agency in Canada to become a B Corp about 6 years ago in 2015. And about a year ago, in October of last year, we were proud to register as one of the first 30 benefit companies in BC. And so I'll share a little bit about a little bit more about that. So on the next slide, I'll chat through why we decided to become a benefit company. And so for us, pursuing benefit company status, it just, similar to B Corp certification, we felt that it reinforced our ongoing commitment to use our business as a force for good. We know that accountability is key. And so with this new legislation in place, being legally bound to our public benefit commitments, that was a responsibility that we just felt proud to take on. Benefit company status, it enables businesses to to act to solve social and environmental challenges without the concern of falling outside of legal or corporate obligations. And so for us, we have just one shareholder of the company that we know is committed to our mission. The benefit company status means that any future directors of the company will be held to those same standards. And so that was really attractive to us. And then the response, so I mean, we of course, we expected that the response would be fairly positive. We shared the news with our networks. We did a newsletter and shared on social media and all of that stuff. And so we were of course happy to see a positive response, and we're especially pleased to see so many clients reaching out to personally express how impressed they were to see us leading this charge. We actually work with a lot of our clients to help them with their B Corp certification and recertification. And many of them are now starting to express interest in becoming a benefit company as well. And so we're keen to be working with our clients to help them take that step. Internally for our team, not much has changed, on a day-to-day basis because we're continuing to live the same values that we always did. But for us, benefit company, it's just a label that allows us to communicate what we already knew we were doing, and another way that we can kind of demonstrate how Yulu is walking the walk when it comes to our mission and our values. I'll talk through some considerations. So shareholder accountability, I mentioned before, directors and officers of a benefit company, so current and future, will always be required to act with a view to conduct business in a responsible and sustainable manner. And so this can actually be a really attractive piece to investors. It demonstrates that your company has increased legal protection and accountability and transparency around its mission. And so this can be a really attractive piece. There is, of course, some increased administration work. So, for example, as mentioned, benefit companies are required to produce an annual benefit report that assesses the company's performance against third-party standard, which for us, of course, is BLAB. And so I'll show you an example of our benefit report next, but there is, of course, some work that goes into all of that process. $100 filing fee for us because we were just changing our company status. At the moment, there aren't any kind of legal or financial benefits like tax breaks or anything like that, but we are really hopeful that that will be something that is implemented in the future, just to encourage more businesses to take this step. And so I've just shared on the next slide a screen grab of a little glimpse of our benefit report, our annual benefit report that's published on our website. And so I know many companies are probably already producing an impact report as we were. And so now that we are a benefit company, we've just refined it to make sure that it's really clear that we're demonstrating how we're promoting each of the 5 benefit provisions that Yulu selected to commit to champion. So for us, we have the economic benefit, global benefit, environmental benefit, cultural benefit, and industry benefit. If you're interested in learning more, you can go on our website and learn a bit more about each of those. And in our annual benefit report, we'll express how each of the milestones that we achieved over the year directly benefited each of those 5 different areas. And yeah, so that's the main takeaways. I'm happy to chat with anybody about our experience or answer any questions. Feel free to reach out and get in touch.
Thank you so much, Jenna, and for that. And so that actually, concludes kind of the presentation portion of this webinar. I know some people have been asking questions in the Q&A. And Karen, I don't know if there's anything that you think we should be discussing ahead. One thing just to note, on this slide deck that you will be getting later, there will be a bunch of links to different resources for you to take a look at. I know I saw things around like the legal piece, as I mentioned, that we've had I believe Blake's, which is a law firm in Toronto, do a more extensive review into what this entails and speaking specifically to other lawyers about why this is necessary and why and what that implication is as well. And just other really great resources relating to your certification process, because obviously it's not just about the legal. We want to make sure that you're well supported in your journey. It looks like there's no other general questions. Again, really want to say thank you to Stephen, Elaine, and Jenna for spending their time with us to give us a bit of their perspective and tell it from their view. We hope this was helpful to you. We'd love any feedback. And just keep your eyes open for emails on more resources and the recording and this actual slide deck. Thank you, everyone.